Merry Christmas, good people of this universe and beyond. And if you don't celebrate Christmas, then happy solstice, because regardless if you don't celebrate solstice, it is part of everyone's lives. The talk today, I'm going to try and keep it brief and definitely going to keep it to 20 minutes, but moving on. The talk today is going to be on the shadow, and I really want to talk about the shadow versus the light, and why there is a distinction between how you interact with each, and why they are equal but require different ingredients to add to their alchemical structure. Ingredients meaning different approaches, which ultimately is the key to blending them. Pardon. So I was thinking about, because I've said before, talking about the shadow and how it is equally important to our light, our inner light, our higher self, the part of us that wants to feel good, and therefore, if intelligent enough and wise enough and willing to act in such a way, will do unto others as we would have them do unto us, as we recognize a relationship with feeling good, and therefore recognize a relationship with feeling bad, and therefore, if wise, see that everyone around us has, to some degree or another, that same relationship in themselves. The difference in the approach between the light and the dark, the light body and the shadow body, the difference in the approach would kind of look like this in a nutshell, and then I'll expand. So with the light, you want to embrace it and become the light, because dwelling in the light is a place of peace and non-fear, and also illumination. That sounds like a really good place, correct? Well, you can't do it without having an interaction with the shadow or the darkness. Now, the approach to the shadow and the darkness is not necessarily to embrace it. Now, I'm using words here to describe this, so this is where convolution and misinterpretation and miscommunication happens. So bear that in mind. It's not necessarily that you want to embrace the dark, it's that you want to understand it. You want to understand it, and you want to get close enough to it and have a relationship with it enough that you can also look back, almost as if you walked into a dark room and you came from a light room and you walked all the way deep into the dark room, still having, a doorway or a passageway where you came from the light. You could look back and you could see the light. Now, it wouldn't be an illuminated room, but you would be able to see the passageway and the light that was beyond it and somewhat spilling into the dark in that gray area. You want to be able to observe the light from the shadow perspective, because, and vice versa, because that is where you can actually shed illumination on illumination, and also illuminate the dark, because you understand the dark when you're in it. You understand that it's different. And so this is just really, the way I'm describing it is really basic terms. It's just like light and dark, like in the visual terms, in the physical sense, in the sensational senses, of the term. So So when we do this in life, in actual real life, and in real life, we have more than just our sight, sound, you know, feeling, touch, all that good stuff that helps us navigate. We also have intuitive, psychic senses that are so there all the time. And in fact, the more that you work with your psychic, intuitive side, the more sharp it becomes. Just like the more that you work on maybe trying to smell or taste, let's say taste. The more that you work on tasting all sorts of craft beers, the better you become at tasting that beer. The more that you pay attention to your tongue, the taste buds, the more that you are aware of them. That's mindful. I know I'm throwing out always these cliche terms because I think that, and I know I'm throwing them out, but I'm always referring to them as cliche because sometimes they'll trip people up and people are mindful. I hate that word, like I do. Shh. But it's actually a great, it's represented perfectly in mindful, full of mind. So you become aware when you pay attention to a particular sense, just like you could become aware of your toes if you focus on thinking about your toes. And from there to your knees, if you focus on, I can feel my knees, but most of the time you're not like walking around unless they're hurting. You're not walking around like, oh, there's my knees all the time. So when we want to sense in the psychic way, we need to pay attention to our psychic senses, which in more plain terms is our intuition, or in religious terms would be the Holy Spirit. That's my interpretation. You can think whatever you want. I'm okay with that. And in this sense is how we will, in this sense, in this perspective, we need to use this sense to be able to understand the mental workings of what being in the darkness or being in the light is. So to go into the darkness, if we were going to say, let's practice an exercise, I'm going to just throw out going into a really divey bar. That's what I'm going to say. And in fact, it might be a divey bar, including a place where you know particularly some people that you don't particularly admire, or so there's dark things about it that feel like they might suck your energy, or you know, people might be having conversations that completely you do not resonate with, or you just, you know, aren't appropriate for you. Now, it's a good practice to put yourself in a position, and it doesn't have to be this, you know, but we can go through a few things, maybe not in this video, but like a list at one point of different examples of various, on a spectrum of dark places that one can safely go into to get a perspective of the dark and also the light. But for me, it could be a bar, and it could be a place where I know that maybe in the past I've had problems staying away from, or problems, maybe not wanting, problems wanting to have a drink there, or problems with the people that are there that make me start to feel angry just even by being around them, or, you know, defensive. So that's one place. And say we're in that bar and we do, you know, people are putting in money at the slot machines, and maybe we're all of a sudden becoming judgmental because we know that that person at the slot machine just got paid, and he or she is blowing their paycheck, and you know that their family is depending on them, and they don't care because maybe not only are they gambling, that they're high on a substance and they spent their money on the substance and now they just need something to fiddle around with, and they also, you know, blah, 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 and you become judgmental and you think about that, and then maybe you look over at the end of the bar and you see the same old, you know, town drunkard or drunkardess, and that person is just sitting there kind of with a sad, blank, kind of depressed expression, holding their drink, and you in your head say, oh my gosh, I feel bad for that person. They're still on this gravy train. I'm so glad I got out. And then maybe the bartender comes up, and the bartender hasn't seen you in a while, but the last time that he or she did, they had to kick you out, 86 you, which is maybe the last time you drank or something, and yet you've, you know, maybe talked with the bartender and they know that you've gotten sober, or maybe you don't drink as much, though. They are accepting you being there, but maybe they have a very skeptical and very judgmental eye on you, and it's making you feel uncomfortable, and then your discomfort and your insecurity starts to become anger because you're thinking, it's like, don't judge me. And so all of a sudden there's this cloud of all sorts of negative emotions around you. And what I suggest that you do in this kind of scenario is allow it to happen, but in a different way than you have allowed these feelings and emotions to happen perhaps from before. I mean, if you've already done this kind of stuff, you don't even need to watch this video. But maybe before you allowed your mind, see, there's a very fine line. Maybe before you allowed your mind to think these things and be guided as if you were being taken by your proverbial hand down the alleyways of your mind into every kind of space that your mind wanted to go, judgmental and negative, and you were kind of just like being pulled along. Now, the difference between that and allowing yourself to go there, but not allowing your mind or your thoughts to control where you're going, what you want to do, and it's very helpful to already have a practice of being centered and grounded, which meditation helps for a lot of people. Also, becoming more aware of who you are, and self-love and self-confidence is huge. You know, knowing what you're doing, maybe write it out before you go in here, all the steps you're going to do, and keep your mind as present as you can, and allow it to look around and allow it to judge if it needs to judge. But as soon as you are judging or negative, just allow your thoughts to be there, but do not attach much more than just that allowance to those thoughts. Don't attach yourself into this incredible conversation that pulls you down other paths and conversations in your head. Allow yourself to be with each thought as if it was a brand new person that you were meeting, that is going to be, and you're on your wedding day and you're meeting all your in-laws and you have no idea who they're going to be. So you allow yourself to meet each one, but you know you have to go to another one, and you guide it. You say, oh, hi, Uncle, Peterson, and oh, hello, Aunt Virginia, how are you doing? Oh, you're not doing so good. Hi, I will be right back to you. I'm kind of create this relationship with each of these thoughts, and then pass on to whatever next is going on. And if you ended up getting engaged in a conversation, say with a person, say Sad Sally at the end of the bar, town drunkardess, who is looking really sad, and you're doing this mindful exercise, and you suddenly, because you're not dwelling in this non-self-led, dark pathway down the halls of your mind, you're able to actually turn your attention to maybe Sally, and you start to feel a little bit, not negative, but actually some compassion for her, and maybe you never really gave her the time of day, so you go down there and you're feeling kind of good from being present in the moment, and you say, hey Sally, you start engaging in a conversation, and where these like present mindful things and this allowing acceptance of people that are dark and of your dark thoughts, you can really go into these incredibly amazing spaces. And I will tell you, first fucking hand, this is where this is the good emotional response that I have to thinking about my past of consciously going into the dark after having been very unconsciously in the dark, and discovering absolute gold mine of the most beautiful and precious moments that I can account for in my life. Some of them really changed my life and actually grew a leg or two more of wisdom within my spirit. And perhaps maybe you had a conversation with Sally and you realized that Sally has this very, very intricately and devastatingly beautiful story that opens your mind to more consciousness and opens your mind to a level of compassion you've never felt before, and you connect with her, and then all of a sudden she sees somebody see her and hear her, and she begins to become emotional in a good way, and then all of a sudden you guys, now this is where the real this is where the real magic is happening. So you are having this interaction, and because of your compassion and because of her receiving of your love and ability to receive. A lot of people in the dark, not all, but some people in the dark have a much greater capacity to receive than people who are living in a kind of unconscious light enlightened way. And so the magic and synergy that's happening now is that there's this beautiful sensation of you are in the right spot at the right time doing the right thing, and you see it in her eyes and she sees it in yours, and there is a moment of recognition that things in the universe are so much more beautiful and so much more connected and so much more interesting and so much more complex than perhaps you had believed before. And this becomes, for both you and Sally, after the experience, like a mile marker. It never leaves your mind, and in fact, oftentimes, if you've done it correctly, it will become the sown seeds that will grow into you understanding how to do this kind of practice and going in and actually offering beautiful help to certain people or situations or whatever it really is, or maybe you getting help in certain places in a beautiful way, because now you're confident and you've sown the seeds of love, and you grow a garden of consciousness, and you grow an alchemical garden in which you eventually could have a beautiful alchemical marriage, a merger of your ego and your spirit. And that's actually the objective. And I hope that I explained it somewhat well today. I do want to maybe come back on at one point and do more thought experiment, a list of different examples of different places, because it absolutely does not have to be this bar. That just is something that I'm perhaps related to, but it could be a lot of different things, and it could actually be facing, perhaps even like say facing a parent or a person that is very uncomfortable for you to be around because it stirs up so much difficult emotions. That's one thing. Or it could be going into the darkness of creating a brand new habit that you know is going to be painful for you, to break one habit to go into the new habit process that you know is better for you, but you're so afraid of the dark feelings that will come up, or you know, allowing yourself to go to certain emotions and talk to them out loud with a certain type of shaman. I suggest that, or therapist of some type, or just talking to somebody where you can express openly and open old wounds. That's going into darkness too. And it all takes a really strong mental space. So you really need to map it out and think about it, and do whatever kind of little, you know, writing down notes, or you know, there's a process that you might need to, and for some people it's just a mental process, like, okay, I'm going to be ready, I know what, I'm just going to trust my intuition, but there's a process that needs to happen before you go into these spaces. And ultimately what this does is give you perspective on the light from the beautiful abyss of the void of darkness, which is not always as scary and as Darth Vader-ish as we all tend to think that it might be. So if you don't celebrate Christmas, then I wish you a very beautiful solstice, or any other holiday, or whatever you are participating in tonight. Thank you so much for watching this, and as always, much love.